What do you see with the S95C? An unstoppable machine ready for battle. A predator in the TV jungle. A silent assassin. Bird of prey. I will tell you what I see. Hey, what's up, guys? This is Brian from Brian's Tech Therapy. Thank you so much for joining me today. I have a very special guest for this conversation, our good friend Fomo. Fomo, how are you?
I'm doing great, man. Good morning. Happy Valentine's Day.
Oh, happy Valentine's Day to you. This will probably air the next day, but hello, sweetheart.
Hey, you know what? It's all love every day. I love it.
Absolutely. Well, our topic today, and this is purely my theory, but we've talked about this many times. And the reason why I wanted to have you on is you were there when, or I should say, I was there when you unboxed the Sony S95B from last year. Now, the graphics. Yeah. And so the graphics of this video shows the perception of what the S95C means to many. And to many, it's this killer machine that's going to dominate the year. We all know that. For me, it's not a conspiracy theory, but I think the marketing and the perception, at least in my point, is that the S95C is simply a decoy, an amazing decoy. Last year was the biggest leap we've seen in TV technology in many years, being QD-OLED. But I do think that it is there to pave the way for the QD-LED or Neo QLED lineup and their 8K lineup to dominate. And the reason I say this is the way they surprise dropped it last year, and we'll go through this conversation as you and I both went through it together. But I do feel them surprise dropping it again this year. The confusion with the price leaks, it is there simply to fight LG, to keep LG's C3 and G3 busy. The Z3 is not part of the conversation as it's way too expensive. And while they fight the one weapon from LG, I feel Samsung's rest of their LED lineup will simply dominate with way, way too many models. Fomo, give me your take on my, not my conspiracy theory, but on my thoughts here.
Well, okay, so you're saying decoy, and I love that description. The S95C is a decoy, and when I think of decoy, I'm thinking you have a duck, like a fake duck, sitting in the pond. All the other ducks kind of like, all right, and as a distraction. So if you're saying the S95C is a distraction, it's not meant to be anything more than, okay, this is awesome, as maybe a halo product for LG to put all its resources to kind of like basically say, oh, wow, the S95C, well, the S95B last year was awesome. The S95C this year is even more awesome. So we're going to have to respond. And it appeared they did, right? They rushed their MLA to market. It's on the G3, not just the 8K. It's on the 4K up to 77-inch. And I think this decoy strategy is going to backfire on Samsung. I'm hearing from whatever Philips and Panasonic, it appears that the MLA is going to surprise a lot of people, the G3 specifically. I don't know. As a decoy, maybe they're hoping LG will waste its resources on responding. But is it a waste if the G3 actually wins everything?
Well, I guess
all the various shootouts and comparisons. I mean, does the decoy backfire?
Well, I guess we're kind of previewing your next video about LG and then my video following it on LG. But if we back up, Fomo, to last year, CES conversations for last year where the Samsung S95B would release at the end of the year. This is amazing to really think about. The end of the year being last year or the beginning of this year, which would be now,
right,
for the S95B. Now, here we are a full generation later for the S95C. So let me just replay it for everyone who wasn't aware of the launch of the S95B. It was dropped early, out of nowhere, very much how it was dropped this weekend, where apparently if you had a Best Buy pre-order a la Xbox or PS5, you could just go pick it up.
People have been getting it last week of all things.
So last year Samsung was very vague, and I'll have Fomo describe this a little bit in a moment. The difference between Samsung displays and Samsung electronics. It's very
Mhm.
important for this
Very important.
conversation.
Right.
But last year we had LG C2, LG G3, both came out when they were supposed to, when they were going to launch, and they took the world by storm. The G3 or G2 was easily going to be the best OLED. Finally caught up to, actually the C2 caught up to the A90J, but the G3 was going to surpass it. Heatsink, gaming, 83 inches down, 65 inches. It was ready to take over. And then all of a sudden, I get a phone call after a live stream from FOMO who says, I have the S95B. Take it from there, FOMO.
So after CES last year, we were just like, this G2 with the heatsink is going to be amazing. And we predicted it would win the shootout. It is what the A90J wasn't, which was it wasn't as bright. This G2 was going to do it. And so we're all ready to crown it even before the shootout. And then, of course, the S95B pops up. And we don't know how it's going to be. We just know it's QD-OLED. So when I did the unboxing and you were there, you could see it on the live stream that it was bright. I mean, normally, memory being what it is, visual memory, oh, you know what? Everything looks kind of the same, but this one, it just popped out at you. And you realize, okay, this is something special. And suddenly, all year, it was about QD-OLED, S95B. And then everyone was highly anticipating the Sony A95K. And the G2's release was like a kind of like a clown horn, right? Right?
Yeah, it kind of
People
knocked it,
weren't
knocked
even
it.
thinking about it because without a heatsink, the S95B was bright and arguably brighter in many ways than the G2 with a heatsink, and that just stole the thunder. And it really stole the momentum from LG. And LG was so excited to release it, but everyone was surprised by the S95B's early release. I mean, we're talking not just in the middle of the year, but the first TV released for 2022 was the S95B.
So I'm going to stop you for 1 second because I remember the conversation 2 weeks before this drop, and this was the conversation. FOMO hits me up, and the reason why I like doing these videos the way you and I do them is this is the way we speak off camera.
Yeah.
So unlike a live stream, we're not worrying about the audience. You and I, this is how we talk daily. And he says to me last year, sends me a screenshot, and he says, "There's no quantum dot literature here. It simply says OLED." So Samsung puts QD-QLED everywhere. If you guys know anything about Samsung and their LED lineup and their 8K lineup, QD everywhere. So he says to me, and FOMO is basically a reporter in this way. He sees these things and he says, Bri, it's not anywhere in the literature. So when it releases and he unboxes it live, the funny thing was it just shows up as OLED on the screen.
Yeah.
Now, this is where I feel like the decoy concept starts for me, is the fact that they're okay sacrificing this amazing technology. What it is, their technology, Samsung Electronics, Samsung Displays. They literally throw it out there as a disruptor. It doesn't affect, well, actually, I think last year, the way they positioned it, it actually cannibalized the Q90B a little bit.
Those in the know.
Because
Those in the know. Because
those
marketing
in the know.
of the Neo QLED is just overwhelming that most people will still buy the Neo QLED. They don't even know what an S95B is, other than
So
us
this,
enthusiasts.
exactly. But this year, it's different. They price leak it even earlier. They also are releasing it before the QN90C. And what's funny is there's no never been a supply, or I should say, surprise drop of their QD or their LED lineup.
Yep, never.
So I feel like the Quantum Dot OLED, and if you look at the way it was positioned in the booth at CES, it was two screens only, the 95 and the 90. There were 3 or 4 of each of the mini LEDs. There was an entire micro LED floor.
Oh yeah, the entire wall was all micro LED, all
micro LEDs.
Yes.
And even their Quantum Dot or their QD OLED monitor was actually at Samsung Displays, not at Samsung Electronics booth, if I remember correctly. So your thoughts on the fact that it's really kind of positioned to be that secret weapon to really disturb and block LG's greatest weapons. I mean, it really looks like it, that for me,
right.
Give me your thoughts on, because
Okay.
remember all the lack of advertising last year.
Yes. So for me,
You discovered that.
this is a very deep business game that Samsung's playing. So Samsung has a huge marketing budget. As we know, Samsung is the #1 TV seller in the world, and it's mostly driven by amazing marketing. We're not just talking like they just overwhelm you with marketing, but it's slick and it's high production value. So when you walk into anywhere, you feel that Samsung is very much a high-end brand. However, with marketing budgets being what they are, every product has a marketing earmarked for that product that's priced into it. And by Samsung last year not putting any marketing budget into that individual lineup of the S95B, it allowed them to price it really cheap because it's basically influencer marketing, right? They drop it early, they let us run away with it. If we run away with it, great. If we don't, doesn't matter. They had such a small volume anyway. But regardless, they're able to price it at an incredible value. I mean, just think about this. First generation technology of this magnitude priced at under 2000. I mean, by the end of the year, it was like 1800 for the 65-inch. That is unheard of. I mean, that's just crazy. And it's because there was no marketing cost to raise that tax. It's a marketing tax. And so this year, they're doing it again. This is the S95C now. If you go on the website, you know what? It's OLED, right? There's nothing there. And
No, nothing.
the way to see if you're going to be paying for the marketing is if Best Buy will have it on their main floor. That costs them millions of dollars to have any of their models on the main floor, on the wall. That cost each model millions of dollars, right? The entire floor space. Together, the entire price of the Neo QLED lineup jumps because of that floor space. S95B last year, it was in the back. It was inventory, but you had to ask, hey, where is it? And they have to pull it out, right? There was literally no space set aside. And if there was any, it was like way in the back where the cheap seats are. And if that happens again this year, this is why the pricing again. So I predict the S90C will take advantage of that non-marketing. They'll throw it out there. That could be a decoy for the technologies. Throw it out there. It'll be priced nice and cheap. The S95C may have some market space somewhere on the floor at Best Buy. Maybe that would explain why it's slightly premium. But even at 4,500, if the G3 is like 42, 4,300 for first gen technology, that's almost priced even with the G3, which is like, wow, that's pretty impressive. And I think the prices will drop to the point where by Prime Day, they'll be both priced the same. But this allows consumers to get a shot at the technology, relying on us, you and I, and the rest of our crew to talk about it, because there's just enough inventory to sell through as long as YouTubers talk about it. But if they had 2 million of these things to sell, they would have to market it to move that much volume. But at a few 100,000, I think we can move it between us and Europe and the rest of the world. That's enough to move all the panels.
So you bring up an excellent point as well about Best Buy. Was Best Buy, I call it a kiosk. It's actually called a pad. It's what they pay for. And Samsung has the best. Samsung will typically put their 800 or 900 8K as the centerpiece. The 900 series will typically be in a Magnolia section or former Magnolia section. Then they will do 6 series, 7 series, 8 series, 9 series. They also have an 85N90 or whatever it is. They have a 75, a 70. So they kill you with models, while Sony has simplified their LED lineup to 2 models in that range.
Mm-hmm.
Samsung floods. So to me, what it's like is sending out 2 big blockers to hit LG's main weapons.
Yeah.
And then allow all the smaller and bigger fighters through. Because LG no longer has even a QNED lineup to also have people thinking there's more. So where I think LG is focusing on pure quality, I don't think they feel they need, and I don't think they need it either.
Mm-mm.
But it's like people at a party.
Yeah.
How many people you have? Well, I have 2. And I have the big guy, the Z3 coming in later on. I think people they like options. They like the perception of options. But when you walk into Best Buy, and where the S95 is positioned is actually by the Q7, which in front of the Samsung kiosk, there are some cheaper TVs, the Crystal TVs, those Samsung ones, I'm sorry. That's where the S95 is placed. It is told to be put there by Samsung, not by Best Buy. I've asked 5 or 6 different Best Buys all over the country, and they say we're told to put them there. So they're also not even allowed to really be recommended. If you ask them for OLEDs, they'll recommend somebody else. To me, that is fascinating. But if we talk about last year, it's happening again this year. You, me, the rest of our crew have many other videos to make. I have several that are ready to release. Just like last year, I was at Value Electronics, C2, G2. I'm on fire. You're on fire. Everybody's rocking it. This TV comes out and halts everything. This happened again this year with the price leak.
Yeah.
And it's happening again with this surprise drop this weekend. Even myself, who can easily wait for it to show up at Value Electronics in a couple weeks, was about to drive to New Jersey warehouse and try and get it.
Warehouse, yeah.
Now, that chaos is all they're doing. That's why it's a decoy.
Yes.
Having it come out bright and powerful and then limiting its brightness or changing it, I don't think they care what happens to it, to be honest. Now we saw
it's free advertising. It's us talking right now. Yep.
Yep. And I think in all the confusion, by the end of the year, the QN90B was one of my highest recommended TVs of the year. QN900B, if you wanted to go very high end. The S95 became this unreliable TV, even though we both think it's still amazing. It was kind of thrown away by the end of the year. Bent panels, it wasn't the same.
Firmware,
so
yeah.
That I felt like, and even now as this TV is launched and we have a few people in forums that have it, it may not be as bright as we thought. Well, this is the double standard of what Samsung does. Whoever has that TV probably doesn't want to update it. There isn't a day one update, but you have to update it if you want it to perform. So they've gotten themselves in this weird spot. If LG does do what we think it's going to do with the G3, this is where their trust will backfire. But I think in the confusion, people may still buy one of their QLEDs.
You mentioned the day one update. So the S95C, based on the early ownership experience, clearly it needs a firmware update to make sure gaming, color, features, all that stuff. Maybe something to update it to push the brightness a bit more. Right now we're seeing owners who have the meters 1300, 1375, 1400, but it's definitely less than 1500 peak brightness no matter what they do to it. And it could be Samsung not optimizing the firmware because like we said, wait, this is an early drop. Did they just port over last year's firmware from the S95B?
Yeah, might be.
If you take the S95B, put on the S95C, it's not the same panel. You're not pushing it, right? So in those rare instances where we would tell users, why hold on to the original firmware, but I'm going to have to update it because it's got to get better. It can't get worse. It cannot get more OEM than the way it is right now. It is just unfinished firmware. You get a feel that it was just a ported over S95B based on current users and whatnot. And it wouldn't surprise me because it's an early drop. Whereas I get the sense that Sony and LG, they work the firmware where the first release of that firmware is actually pretty good with, minor gaming. And gaming is always hard. But as far as just everything else, picture quality, they're mostly there. And I think Samsung uses firmware guinea pigs. We're the guinea pigs stored out there. You go on the forum. Hey, let's see the forums. What's wrong? All right. Okay. Those are the top 3 things, right?
They let you troubleshoot.
For those that are wondering, they meaning all 3, Sony, LG, Samsung, they do look at the forums. Now, whether they read every post, they get a sense of the biggest complaints, and definitely they watch our YouTube channels. They've told all of us that those who are quote unquote influencers, to the extent that we influence positive changes to help them match expectations of the market with their enthusiast direction and all that stuff, they will make changes. Some listen better than others, but the reality is they're waiting to hear the feedback. And I think Samsung now just relies on the feedback. That's what it feels like to me. Like this whole film mode fiasco last year, right? Where we all loved its super bright, punchy output from day one. And then suddenly they pull everything back and make it now it's below EOTF curve. So at the beginning of the year, it was above EOTF, a little bit too bright. Now it's under tracking in some modes, right? Like gaming in particular, apparently it's like under tracking and it's just the highlights aren't there. I really don't know what Samsung's doing with their software team, but to your point, this is one of those day one firmware updates where I can't wait to update the firmware. Just hearing already, reading up on what we see, and we're going to see it in person at some point, but we'll see. We'll see how it looks. And I hope there's a firmware update by the time I get it.
Well, and this is why last year, and I know I was going to do a video on this, but I kind of ran out of time, as 2022 being the worst TV year for the consumer. For us, it was a blast. It was a bit of a disruptor. It definitely knocked me off because I had access to the S95 a few weeks later. But it immediately cooled off any traction for us as influencers to do C2 or G2 content or
Mhm.
content of any kind other than S95B. And we all admitted we did way too many live streams, too much conversation. We had probably 20 channels that were born from that display. So
Yeah.
when Samsung and the other manufacturers talk about us being influencers, I think about a bunch of rabid puppies, and they just were waiting for something to do, and they hand it to us and we just run with it.
Mhm.
With us running with it, even if it's not bright, it is bright. Now you're in anticipation to wait if the patch makes it brighter or if
Mhm.
it gets fixed. Either way, you're not buying an LG. Either way, you're not making that choice yet because you could have this more colorful, beautiful TV. Now, at Samsung Displays, we saw, special shout out to Shirag and the rest of the Samsung Display squad. We were able to see, we can't even call it the S95C because it's not that. It is the QD-OLED. We see it raw.
Right.
Hasn't any processing from Samsung Electronics. It is awe inspiring. And that's some of the demo material you saw at the beginning of this video. You've seen on many of your videos, Fomo. We know this is a leap. And I've mentioned other video games like Titanfall 2 being sacrificed, better games in between two subpar games to confuse. And I do feel like that's happening here as I'll have you describe a little bit of what you think the difference is. The Samsung display, Samsung electronics,
Yeah.
something, the way you explain it to me is best.
So this is something that a lot of our viewers have to understand is when you see a lot of the footage from CES and you'll see a mismatch of S95C, S90C, and then QD-OLED from Samsung Display. These are three completely different images and comparisons. Samsung Electronics or Samsung Visual is the TV division. So when you hear S95C, S90C, specific TV models, that comes from Samsung Electronics, right? And they're in charge of actually producing the TVs. They will put their firmware, their chip, the casing, all of that. Samsung Display only creates the raw panel. So if you look behind the panel that we saw, literally, it's just electronic chips and
It's a
transistors.
little guy. He's
There
like,
is no
hi.
case. I know there's a guy holding it up, right? There is no case. It is
Yeah.
pressed against a cardboard box where behind it, they showed us, wow, it's just raw
Yeah.
electronics. And what they
And
did,
it's glorious, by the way.
and that's what it is,
It's glorious.
rather than have any specific TV maker, they themselves optimized to show it off to potential TV customers. So Panasonic, Philips, Sony would visit the Samsung Display booth and they would look at what's possible. So Samsung Display will be able to push it as hard as they want. They're not selling this raw panel to consumers, but as CES attendants, we get to see this unleashed because what do they care about a 2-year warranty? They're there to push it to its limits. And if it breaks after CES, whatever, because that's the job of Panasonic, Philips, and Sony to then pull it back for longevity, durability, whatever. But Samsung Display is there to say, okay, this is what it could do at the highest end, right? You could push it. And so this whole 2100 nits, that's coming from Samsung Display. Samsung Electronics is not promising 2100 nits, or is it? If you look at any of the materials that's coming out of Samsung Display, that it's or 2000 nits. I think 2100 nits is LG G3, but let's say 2000 nits. This is Samsung Display saying, hey, if Samsung Electronics tone maps and pulls
Yeah.
it back and does all these things and it brings it out 1400 nits, that's their choice. And Sony has done the same, right? Sony takes the same panel and is not as bright as the S95C in certain instances because they don't want image retention. So Sony pulls it back even further, but Samsung Display is telling you, look, depending on the TV maker, this panel is capable of 2000 nits. Now, it's up to the TV maker to decide, if I want to do a warranty claim system on this, how many claims can I handle? If I push it to 2000, I'm going to get more claims. So the TV maker may be more conservative, and maybe the S90C will be pushed to 2000 nits, right? We don't know. So there's a lot of, if you look at the owner forums, they'll be like, oh my gosh, it's only like so many nits. We were promised 2000. Who promised you 2000? The ceiling of the QD-OLED could be 2000, but that's a raw panel that the display manufacturer says, I can push it to 2000. Samsung Electronics chooses not to. Don't blame our technology, right? We've seen it in the lab. Here it is, 2000. And that's something that we have to remember. Who is saying it's 2000? It's Samsung Display or Samsung Electronics. And the S95C, I honestly don't remember if there were any materials from the S95C specifically saying 2000 out there, but I know Samsung Display with their new blue and all these things, right? 2000, it's definitely came from Samsung Display. Did Samsung Electronics take that as well? Viewers should let me know. Go out there and see, where is this 2000 that's being promised? Because the media and the press are also, they may be confused as well. We need to source, and I'm going to have Shrog on. I'll be interviewing him tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, and I'm going to ask him about that, because he won't be able to represent what Samsung Electronics is doing, but I could ask him point blank, were you able to get to 2000? It's in your lab, what conditions? And I even emailed him and said, hey, there's been some questions. He goes, those are wonderful questions. I'm going to hit it at your interview. So we're going to get Samsung Display's point of view. Under what conditions did they have 2000 nits? And then, maybe we'll have a bit more context, because a lot of potential owners are a little disappointed. Like, wait a minute, where's my 2000 nits? 1300 nits, that's like a G2.
Yeah, well, and that goes back to what we're saying about even that confusion it'll make you either hesitate. Either way, you're not buying the G3 yet. And I think that's the point.
Reviews, okay, what is the real?
You want to wait. Yeah, and it hopes that by the end of the year, or whenever you decide to choose, first adopters are going to buy it anyway. We're going to push it and talk about it. But where last year, what it did is it freezed the entire year. Now, I don't ever think that Samsung Electronics crippled the QD-OLED. I used that word several times last year. I think without the heatsink, they tried to keep it safe, to your point. And then there's also the misconception that the QD-OLED sold well, which is a misconception. They took a bath on them. They sold them for nothing in comparison to what we thought $8,000 or $7,000 for 65 inches was our guess at CES last year.
It was.
For the 65, which the A95K, look at how expensive it was. Thank God it was in a larger housing. It was built better. But I don't think they crippled it on purpose. I think they tried to save it. I don't think, to your point, they wanted to do warranty costs on a TV they were losing money on. Now, people will say I'm crazy. They sold out everywhere. Initially, they did because they were a surprise drop. I know the numbers of what they sell on mini LED versus QD OLED. It is not close, and it's not just models. Market share for mini LED is the largest in the world. They are not going to give that up, everyone. That is my point of this entire conversation. They are not going to cripple their own golden goose. Back to our duck analogy.
We have to address this. I don't think the viewers recognize how much profit margin is in their mini LED. The Neo QLED series from the 85E or 85C, 90C, 95C, all the Q1 series is a huge profit margin.
Massive.
Whereas QD-OLED, without marketing, it's like this. And they're like, no matter how many of these you move, if you move a bunch of this with profit margin, this is what they want. And because they've already figured it out, they have their entire supply chain lined up. They are assembling the TVs in-house, so they minimize the cost, maximizing the pricing, right? Sony cannot even come close to the vertical integration of Samsung. So that's why Samsung, you see these steep discounts by the end of the year, they're still making money at those discount prices. They can easily compete with Hisense, but they don't have to until the end of the year when the price is rock bottom. But between now and the end of the year, they're capturing so much profit margin. I mean, just look at all of the recent Q4 earnings. Samsung was the only one that made money on TV. I mean, they made a lot. I mean, it was a record drop in profits. They still made a profit on TVs. Everyone else just eked by and they made a killing. Samsung Display made money selling QD-OLED.
Yeah.
So
Well, because they
they
sold
are,
to everybody.
yes, they are, and it was a smaller volume, but
Yep.
they're a machine. And, they're disappointed. But the irony is LG would love to have that profit margin that Samsung visual TV display had or TV electronics had, right? They didn't have that level of profitability. And so
No.
this is why Samsung doesn't want to get away from mini LED. It is such a cash cow for them. The
Yeah.
longer they can push off QD-OLED, the better it is for their bottom line. And so this is why every year they try to incrementally improve something for the Neo QLED, and they will continue to drop pricing as much as they have to maintain that market share. That volume is such a cash cow. The minute they move into into QD-OLED, the profit's going to disappear.
And the thing is too, if you remember Samsung's marketing over the years, it was all about. And look, they've been with OLED before. They've been with plasma. They've done all this. They're phones,
Oh, they know it.
but they've always said burn in. They've talked about it. They didn't just turn course. And I think the confusion about Samsung's not making LED panels anymore. That is, yes, maybe they aren't. Doesn't mean they're not selling them anymore. And what's very interesting with their numbers, FOMO, was we hear about Hisense and TCL being like second among LED sellers. That is at a certain level. That is not at the premium market. So they're hitting the low end market with your Costco's and your Walmarts. They dominate there by they're number one. Hisense or TCL, I believe, is number two. Even Vizio is there somewhere. And then at the highest end, they're way number one. So
And
that
what
has got nothing to do with OLED.
I think is context. You and I say high end. High end starts at $1,000 as far
Yep.
as consumers are concerned. That $999 price point is huge. And above $999, Samsung completely dominates, and LG OLED as well. So LG dominates in the OLED segment of premium flagship, but they don't even come close to the volume being pushed by the QN85B, the QN90B, and the QN95B. Those three will outsell the C series, the G series, and the B series by volume and profit margin. I
Yes.
mean, just everything about it. Samsung has the brightness war won with that. And most
Mhm.
people live in a bright room. They will love that 85. I mean, the 85B impressed me with its brightness, frankly. And I thought
Oh
it
yeah.
outperformed the 90B in many viewing circumstances. In sports, it was as bright. In a bright room, you didn't notice the contrast difference at all. It had better color saturation on axis, which shocked the heck out of me. And then off axis, the color saturation was preserved, even though there was a slight, if you have black bars, you could then start seeing the blooming. But in a bright room, you're not going to notice it. And so the 85B ends up being an amazing deal. And then you look at the wisdom of the crowd. All the reviews on Best Buy or Amazon, the 85B is reviewed more highly than the 95 or the 90B. And that says a
Yeah.
lot. It's a great value TV, and I expect the 85C to be the same this year. I mean, they figured out IPS, so I don't even consider IPS a downgrade anymore as far as BOE is concerned, right? So BOE supplies the world its mini LED, LCD, vertical, kind of like the slice of the world between them and CSOT. BOE's best technology today is the ADS panel. ADS slash, it's like an IPS. Their
Yep.
best technology now is ADS. It's not VA. That's their most expensive. And that's what they're selling to Hisense's flagship. And that's what they sell to Samsung as well. It looks great. If the 85B last year is any indication, and this year's more improved, VA is not going to last because off angle, the
Yep.
IPS or the ADS does preserve color better.
Well, if you remember the A, QN85A shocked us. And
Yeah, it
that
was
became
bright.
the Costco brand, the one that you can buy in store, which people will go for. But even if you pay attention to our conversation right now, where did QD-OLED go?
Yeah.
It disappeared. So when you look at, again, walk into Costco, I'm sorry, walk into Best Buy, and we're going to kind of wrap it up with this. If you walk into Best Buy and you look at Sony's kiosk, you're looking at their cheaper 80 series is their biggest one. They put that out there. Then they put the 80K. Let's just say it's last year, 80K, X95. If you look at what Samsung brings, Sony's last year, let's say X95K, X90K, Z9K, A80K. That was really it. than the A95K. You
Mhm.
look at Samsung, you have the 60, 70, 75, 80, 85, 90, 95, 900, 800, S95. That's at their mid to high end. And in those sizes, you have 43 inches, you have 50 inches, 55 inches, you have 144 hertz, you have a gaming. So, what I'm saying to everybody in this video is the S95C is a jump. QD OLED is a massive jump. But I think it's brought out simply to knock back its biggest competitor, which is the LG C series and now G series. That is my whole argument. There's nothing LG has that can compete with it. Their QNED would have been that. They are only going all in on OLED. That's where their money is. And
Yeah.
I do feel like the Samsung is designed. They're taking the QD OLED for that reason. They actually don't even have to. So this is another thing I'll say as we're wrapping up this long video, and I'll get your take on this, Fomo. They easily could have made a ton of money just selling Samsung display, selling this to anybody, which is what they do with their phones or whatever. And they also have their own Galaxy, obviously. Instead, and unlike their Galaxy phones, they didn't turn this into a flagship. You have to ask yourself why. Why didn't they have their own technology, the Samsung displays, take it and create their flagship? Why wouldn't they make that the crown jewel of their entire lineup? If it's what you and I think it is, why isn't it considered their flagship? The A95K in many ways is the Sony flagship.
It
For
is.
it's too small in a way, but
It's Master
in the
Suite.
way they but don't you feel like they are really still hiding what I think is the best TV? Now I think the S95B is still a fantastic TV. I think it's amazing still. If you have it, you should enjoy it. It just was a wild ride last year, but I do feel in this year I expected, as you did, that the S95C would be the crown jewel of Samsung's lineup. When I saw it, and I said this at CES, why is it in the back? Why is there only two of them? Why is it not before the QD-OLED or the micro LEDs?
Yeah.
Why is it behind the 8K?
They're not even available for sale. So they put these huge walls, right? Good
Yeah,
luck. Good luck getting any of them anywhere. It's not
yeah.
yet available for sale. Yeah.
So we
And
walked into this amazing preview,
yeah.
and I saw the micro LED, and then I saw a gaming 8K. Then
Mhm.
there was their 100-inch 8K, and then there was the QN90C, which is called the Q95C, and then there was the QD OLEDs alone. There was only two of them.
Mhm.
If I was them, I would have had the 55, 65, 77. I would have had 4 or 5 models. Now we were at the exclusive preview. We didn't see the main booth, but I can't imagine that it was different.
Yeah.
But I do feel it is a decoy. That is my thoughts only. But this video is getting rather long. But this is how we talk on the phone every day. Fomo, any closing thoughts on my whole conspiracy or my perception of the QD
It's
OLED?
so a conspiracy is almost as if something is hidden. But I always say follow the money. Every business becomes transparent what they're doing if you follow the money. Mini LED, Neo QLED, non-Neo QLED, the entire LCD lineup is so profitable. Follow the money until it stops being profitable, or until the inflection point where the QD OLED profit margins surpass the Neo QLED profit margins. Until that happens, they're not going to pay any attention to QD OLED. It doesn't make sense. They don't make as much money on QD OLEDs, mostly because there's not a volume. What is it? If I lose $1 and everything I sell, I make it up in volume. There's not even the volume to make it up. So there is no business model that allows them to push QD OLED. There's not enough volume. So if they reduce the margin and sell a bunch of them, can't even sell enough of them. So right now they're in that funny spot where they have to address OLED. So they have. And that's your decoy is, oh, you want OLED? Well, here it is. But let's just put that aside and focus everything on Neo QLED. This is a short ride they have left for mini LED. We don't know how many years, maybe 2, 3, 4. They're going to squeeze as much cash out of those next 3 or 4 years from their LCD market until OLED becomes overwhelming. Let's say LG successfully replaces all their TVs with OLED. At that point, the consumers are just not even looking at Samsung anymore unless they're looking at OLED. Maybe that's when Samsung will make a move. But if Samsung can get away with selling Neo QLEDs for $700 and still make more money, they will push the $700 Neo QLED. So it's
Yeah.
all about follow the money.
Well, and at the end of the year, what's funny is with their large decline in pricing, they almost become the number one brand we recommend for last year.
Oh, yeah.
So they kill us with their initial launch. We recommend them, and then at the end of the year, they're recommended as they're so affordable, and their commitment, guys. Remember, they're not backing away from 8K.
Well,
So
right now, 85-inch QN95B 2300.
yeah,
Instant
it's insane.
recommendation. Make sure you don't have
Yeah,
DLC uniformity, but and then you look at the Sony X95K 85-inch, excellent TV, but still $4,000, literally
still expensive.
almost twice as much. It's not twice better. I'll tell you that right now.
Well,
It is,
and that's
but
and and that's where they dominate in 8K. The Master Series 8K from Sony is always very expensive.
mhm.
Doesn't have a lot of the gaming features. Samsung comes in with the Q900 series. It's by itself. The Z2 is not in the conversation. The Z3 at $30,000, very hard to put in this conversation.
Yeah,
So if you think about it, then you add their projectors, they're just flooding it with
yeah,
volume. And I'll close with this. For many of you that watch our channels, we are the vast minority. This purist, this perception we have, my perception, Fomo's perception, what we think is selling is on what we see in on videos, forums, whatever. That is still a tiny percentage of the average person that still walks into a store and they see those Samsungs on the wall. And while we think that we matter in regards to our opinion of QD-OLED, which we think is next level, the majority of people are still walking in and buying those LEDs, not even the mini LEDs. And I think that's fascinating because to us, it's the end all be all, not QD-OLED, but just TVs in general.
yeah.
But to the masses, they do not look at TVs the way we do,
Mm.
and they just buy whatever's more affordable, whatever has the
Whatever's
most
right,
sizes. Yeah,
whatever's right.
bright,
Samsung,
punchy, and
was
well,
it?
and with sizes.
Samsung literally invented store mode
They
because
did, yes, of
of
course.
the way they set it up so that when you turn it on at the store, it's super bright. All the other TV makers had to follow suit. Samsung's killing it. Well, why is that? Well, they have this special vivid mode that is for stores, and
Oh,
consumers
you
are, oh
froze.
my gosh, that's an amazing TV, and they pick it up, and it's gone. Bright things attract consumers, and Samsung has figured that out.
Oh, I actually lost you for a second. You froze, but I think we're good with that part of it.
Oh,
That's probably my connection. Um, Real quick, also in closing, having a 77-inch size is incredible. But for LG not having an 83-inch, where last year they had not only a 77-inch and an 83-inch, it was very easy to not recommend the S95. It was cheaper, but they only had the two sizes. Now having a 77-inch, where LG not well, they do have an 83-inch. I'm sorry, but not having a
MLA. They don't have the MLA
MLA.
83, right? Or the 97.
So, and people have said already that they're not interested in the 83 simply because even though the APL will be boosted like the C series, it will be brighter than last year's G2. Even with the heatsink, the G3 will be brighter, guys. People won't buy that because they're waiting for next year's G3.
Which will
I'm sorry, G4.
which will
Will
have
have
the
it.
MLA, right? And so you're like, wait, you know what? I'll wait and pay the extra couple $100 to get the MLA. Absolutely.
And that's again where Samsung is still positioned to say, well, if you don't here, and this is the real key. Well, if you don't want that, I have an 85-inch QN95C for you.
Oh yeah.
So they have an answer for everything. And also, this is where Sony's in the struggle. 65, 75, 85-inch X95L, I presume, would be the name of it. All Samsung says is, well, actually, I have a 43, 44, 50, 55. They kill it with volume and numbers. And that's what I mean. They have this huge army, and the QD OLEDs are just a decoy or just one soldier in this army. And
Yeah.
that's where I see that duck on the pond.
I have to say
Fomo,
I'm
good.
impressed. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, and again, using us because they basically said they were gonna. It's marketing genius. They don't have to talk about anything. The price leak, that whole joke, hysterical. But Fomo, I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much for all of your time. I know that you have the interview with Shira coming up.
Mhm.
That'll probably be right after this video launches, and then you also have an LG video coming up.
And we have our live stream unboxing
Next
reveal
Tuesday.
next week, right?
So yeah, we'll finish with that. Actually, next Tuesday. What's the date for that?
21st of February, both myself and Max Chambliss, he's a small YouTuber, but he also is getting a 77-inch S95C. I've asked him to get gaming set up so he can see it. Now, this is out of the box. We won't be updating our firmware. We just want to see it out of the box what it's like. And if there is a firmware update, then we'll update it and see if there's anything different. I will do comparisons with the Sony A95K with similar content we always do, Spears and Munsell, the movies I like that has HDR impact and so forth. And Max will be doing some gaming. He also has the A95K, I think. I forgot what TVs he'll be comparing it to, but for sure, you guys will get some 77-inch love, but there's going to be a TV next to it to see, context, what does it look like, and so forth.
Yeah.
I also have the U8H, but I don't think people are cross-shopping the U8H with the S95C, but definitely A95K. We'll see how it improves year to year.
Yeah, but just think about that. So here we are with a price leak a few weeks ago, a fake drop, maybe real drop last week, and then we have it next week. And then I'll be covering it again the week after. So there you go. They've done all that before LG even releases their C3 this year and G3, which will be available in March before. And that'll be around the time Sony actually announces their lineup. Think about the work they've put in before they even release their QN90C, which I think is, again, the real crown jewel is that 4K and 8K lineup and their QD Neo QLED lineup. Fomo, thank you so much for joining me. We'll see you guys Tuesday. Check out Fomo's channel. You guys are obviously on his channel if you're on my channel. Love you guys. Have a great day. Thank you so much. See you in the comments.
See y'all.
I belong to nobody!